Passport? The woman behind the Air Canada premium check-in counter said it the way people say things when they've already decided the answer doesn't matter. Nadine didn't reach for her bag right away. She set her carry-on down slowly, the way she always did when she was deciding how much patience she had left for the day. It was just after 6 in the morning at Vancouver International Airport. The terminal smelled like floor wax and burnt coffee. Her daughter Zoe was standing beside her, 9 years old, still half asleep, her backpack shaped like a bear sagging off one shoulder. "Of course," Nadine said. She handed over both passports. Canadian, both of them. The counter agent, her name tag read Courtney, glanced at the documents and then looked back up at Nadine with that particular expression. Not hostile. Worse than hostile. Patient. The way someone looks when they're about to explain something they've explained many times before to people they consider difficult. "Ma'am, this is the priority check-in lane for business and signature class passengers." "I know," Nadine said. "This lane is reserved for business and signature class passengers," Nadine repeated evenly. "Yes, you mentioned." Courtney's smile didn't waver. "I just want to make sure there's no confusion. If you'd like to check in for economy, the main queue is just." "I'd like to check in here," Nadine said, "for my flight." Zoe looked up at her mother. Nadine gave her the small nod she always gave when she wanted Zoe to stay calm, to watch, to learn something about how the world worked and how you moved through it without losing yourself. Courtney typed something, looked at the screen, then she did something that Nadine had not been expecting. She called over her supervisor. His name tag read Gerald Foss. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that came from never having been told he was wrong about something important. He walked over with his hands clasped behind his back, took in the scene in approximately 2 seconds. The woman in the plain charcoal wool coat, the child with the bare backpack, the priority lane, and made his assessment just as quickly. "Good morning," he said, in the tone that means the opposite. "Is there something I can help clarify?" "There's no clarification needed," Nadine said. "I'm here to check in for which class of service." She looked at him for a moment. "Signature class. Seat 2A. The booking reference is under Nadine O.C. Mensa," Gerald typed. The pause that followed lasted 4 seconds longer than it should have. "I'm seeing a reservation here," he said slowly, "but I'm going to need to verify this booking before we proceed. We've had some issues with third-party resellers lately, fraudulent upgrades. Are you suggesting my ticket is fraudulent?" "I'm suggesting we verify." "Verify it, then," he typed. The terminal hummed around them. A couple in matching linen blazers walked past, and Courtney waved them straight through without asking to see so much as a boarding pass. Nadine watched that happen. She did not say anything. She looked back at Gerald. Gerald was still typing, or pretending to type. His jaw was set in a way that told her he had found exactly what he expected to find, and was now deciding what to do about it. "Miss O.C. Mensa," he said, "I'm going to ask you to step aside for a moment while we complete the verification process. There are other passengers waiting." Nadine looked behind her. There were no other passengers waiting in the priority lane. "There's no one behind me," she said. "Ma'am, my daughter and I would like to check in for our flight. Our boarding documents are valid. Our passports are Canadian. Our tickets are purchased and confirmed. I've been standing here for 7 minutes." She paused. "What specifically needs to be verified?" Gerald leaned forward slightly. His voice dropped, the way voices drop when someone wants to make something feel like a private conversation while still making sure others can hear. "I understand you feel frustrated, but this is an established protocol for flagged bookings. If you'd prefer, I can have someone from General Check-in assist you in the main queue, and we can have this sorted out." "Gerald," he stopped. "I've flown this route 14 times in the last 2 years. I have Aeroplan Elite status. I fly signature class because I sit on the board of a company that uses Air Canada for most of its executive travel." She said it without emphasis, the way you state a fact to someone who needs to hear it. "So let me ask you one more time. What needs to be verified?" He blinked, straightened. "That's not really relevant to." "My ticket is real," Nadine said. "I'd like to check in now." Zoe tugged gently on her mother's sleeve. "Mummy," she whispered, "are we going to miss the plane?" Nadine looked down at her daughter. Zoe's eyes were worried in the way 9-year-old eyes get worried, not about the adult problem, but about the thing the adult problem might ruin. They were flying to Toronto for a long weekend. Zoe had been talking about the CN Tower for 3 weeks. "We're not going to miss the plane," Nadine said quietly. Gerald cleared his throat. "If you'll just step aside." "I'm going to remain right here," Nadine said. She said it without raising her voice. She said it the way someone says something when they have already decided that no version of this conversation ends with her moving. "And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to either complete this check-in or provide me with a written explanation of which Air Canada policy permits you to remove a confirmed signature class passenger from the priority lane on the basis of a verification process that only seems to apply to some passengers." The last 4 words landed the way she'd meant them to. Gerald looked at her. Courtney looked at Gerald. Nadine looked at neither of them. She had taken out her phone and was calmly scrolling, the way you scroll when you're looking for something you already know is there. What she was looking for was the contact information for Scott Rideau. Scott Rideau was the Vice President of Customer Experience at Air Canada. He'd sat 2 seats down from Nadine at a gala in Ottawa 9 months ago. They'd spoken for 40 minutes about operational culture and accountability frameworks. He'd given her his direct number and told her to call if she ever had a problem, the way executives say that to other executives because they never actually expect to be called. Nadine found the number. She did not dial it yet. She held the phone in her hand and waited. It took Gerald approximately 30 more seconds to make the calculation. Whatever he saw on his screen, or whatever he finally admitted he was seeing, produced a shift in his expression that was almost imperceptible. A slight softening around the jaw. A recalibration. "Miss Osi-Mensah," he said, "your check-in is complete." He set the boarding passes on the counter with a precision that suggested he was controlling something more than the placement of paper. "My apologies for the delay." Nadine slid the boarding passes into her coat pocket. She picked up her carry-on. She looked at Gerald for one more moment, not with anger, not with triumph, but with the steady, clear gaze of a woman who has had this conversation too many times and intends to make sure it was the last time she had it here. "Zoe," she said, "let's go." They walked through the terminal together, past the duty-free displays and the Tim Hortons and the long windows looking out onto the gray Vancouver morning. Zoe reached up and took her mother's hand. "Why did that man make it so hard?" Zoe asked. Nadine thought about how to answer that. She thought about the linen blazer couple who had sailed through without being asked a single question. She thought about the 14 flights, the Aeroplan elite status, the board seat, the direct number she hadn't needed to use. "Some people," she said finally, "make decisions about who you are before you've had a chance to show them, and then they make everything harder to prove they were right." "Were they right?" "No," Nadine said. "They never are." Zoe considered this. "What happens to them?" "Sometimes nothing," Nadine said. "And sometimes exactly what should." She said it without drama. She said it because it was true. What Nadine had not mentioned to Gerald Foss, and had not mentioned to Courtney, and had decided in those first 7 minutes at the counter she would not mention unless it became absolutely necessary, was this. She was not simply a board member of a company that used Air Canada for executive travel. She was on the board of Meridian Capital Group. Meridian Capital Group held a 6.2% institutional stake in Air Canada's parent company. She was also, as of 11 months ago, a member of the airline's own Passenger Experience Advisory Council, an independent oversight body that had been assembled following a series of high-profile service discrimination complaints the previous year. The council met quarterly. Its findings went directly to the executive team. Its members had signed NDAs and had been given full access to customer service incident logs, complaint resolution data, and staff training records across all Canadian terminals. Nadine had been appointed to that council because she was known for 3 things: precision, discretion, and an absolute refusal to let anything slide. She had not mentioned any of this at the counter. She had wanted to see what would happen without it. Now she knew. They found their gate. Zoe pressed her face against the terminal window and watched the ground crew move around the aircraft in their orange vests, and Nadine sat in one of the padded chairs and opened her laptop and began writing. Not an email to Scott Rideau, not yet. She was writing notes: date, time, terminal, counter number, staff names, the exact language used. The moment the couple in linen blazers walked through unchallenged. The 4-second pause after her booking was confirmed. The phrase "fraudulent upgrades." the instruction to step aside, the drop in Gerald's voice when he said, "I understand you feel frustrated." She had been keeping notes like this for a long time. Most of them never went anywhere. She kept them anyway, because documentation was the difference between a story that changed things and a story that didn't. This one, she thought, was going to change things. Zoe pulled herself away from the window and climbed into the seat next to her mother. She looked at the screen without reading it. "Are you working?" she asked. "Yes," Nadine said. "On the plane too?" "Some of it on the plane." Zoe leaned against her shoulder. "Okay," she said, in the tone children use when they've decided to accept something. "But when we get to Toronto, we go to the CN Tower first. Before anything." "Before anything," Nadine agreed. The flight boarded without incident. They were called first, along with the rest of signature class, and a different agent, younger, with careful eyes and a genuine smile, checked their boarding passes and welcomed them aboard, and showed Zoe where the overhead bin was, and did not make any of it harder than it needed to be. Nadine noted her name too. She noted everyone's name. At 35,000 feet, somewhere over the Rockies, Nadine finished her incident report and sent it to two people, the chair of the Passenger Experience Advisory Council and the head of Air Canada's Internal Equity and Inclusion Office. In the subject line she wrote, "Terminal 6, Bot 14 AM, Priority Lane," and her name. She did not cease anyone else. She did not escalate. She did not call Scott Rideau. She didn't need to. What she had learned, over years of sitting in rooms where people underestimated her before she opened her mouth, was that the most powerful thing you could do was not react in the moment. The moment was too small. The moment was just one counter in one terminal on one morning. You documented the moment. You made sure it became part of a record. And then you let the record do what records do. Zoe had fallen asleep somewhere over Alberta. Her head was tipped against the window, her bare backpack tucked under her arm, the CN Tower brochure she'd printed at home still folded in her jacket pocket. Nadine looked at her daughter sleeping and thought about the question she'd asked at the gate. What happens to them? 14 days later, Nadine received an email from the chair of the Advisory Council. It was brief. It said that the incident at Vancouver International had triggered a formal review of priority lane protocols across 6 Canadian terminals. It said that 2 members of staff had been placed on remedial training pending the outcome of the review. It said that the Council intended to recommend mandatory revisions to the airline's check-in training materials, with specific language around equity-based service delivery. It also said that the incident report had been shared, in anonymized form, with the airline's board of directors. Nadine read the email twice, then she closed her laptop and went to find Zoe, who was in the kitchen trying to make pancakes and had gotten batter on Ceciling, and she did not think about Gerald Foss or Courtney or the priority lane for the rest of the day. She thought about them again, briefly, the following week, when she received a separate message from Scott Rideau. He had clearly been briefed. The message was careful and formal, and contained 2 apologies, one for the incident itself, and one for the fact that she'd had to be the one to document it. She appreciated the second one more. She wrote back a single line, "I hope the review produces something lasting." He wrote back, "I'll make sure it does." She believed him. Not because he was a VP, but because she had learned to read people by the things they didn't say, and what Scott Rideau didn't say, in that exchange, was anything that suggested he thought the problem was smaller than it was. There is a thing that happens when someone with power uses it quietly. It doesn't look dramatic. Nobody films it. Nobody stands in a terminal and watches a man get told he's wrong in front of everyone. It doesn't happen that way. It happens in an email at 35,000 feet. It happens in a council recommendation that goes to a board of directors. It happens in a training revision that gets rolled out to staff in Calgary and Edmonton and Halifax. And here, in Vancouver, where on a gray Tuesday morning, a woman and her daughter stood at a counter and were made to feel like they didn't belong somewhere they had every right to be. It happens in the record. And the record, if you write it carefully and keep it accurately and send it to the right people, has a very long memory. Zoe got her CN Tower visit. They went on the glass floor, and Zoe held her mother's hand and looked straight down at the city below, and she was not scared at all. "It's not that bad," Zoe said, looking down through 4 inches of glass at Toronto, spread out 900 feet below. "No," Nadine agreed, "it's not. You just have to not look away." Nadine smiled. You just have to not look away, she said. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been the person at that counter, or if you know someone who has, share it. Leave a comment. Tell us what you think should have happened differently and what gives you hope that it might. We read every single one. And if you want to see more stories like this, stories about dignity, about quiet power, about the people who refuse to be made small, subscribe to Velvet Honor. We're here every week. See you next time.